Welcome to class. My name is Tom, the course instructor of this video. In this video we will investigate integer and floating point number. In the video introducing common Python data types, we learned that both integer and floating point numbers are number data types. So they can be used together in a calculation or comparison statement without any compatibility problem. For example, this calculation statement consists of both integer and floating point numbers. Let's print out the value of variable x, as well as its data type. The calculation statement worked as expected. Because one of the components in the statement was of floating point type, the resultant object was also a floating point number. Now consider these two numbers, 100 and 100.0. Are they equal? Are they identical? To understand what this means and to find out the answer, let's perform the following. Create variable x and assign to it an integer value of 100. Also create another variable y and assign to it a floating point number of 100.0. Then print out the result of the comparison of whether x equal to y. This double equals sign is so-called the equal comparison operator. It will compare the value of x and the value of y. If two values are equal, the comparison result will be true. If they are not equal, the result will be false. Then, print out the result of the comparison, whether x is y. In other words, are they identical? The word is so-called the identity comparison operator. It will compare the identity of x and the identity of y. If x and y have the same object ID, they are pointing to the same object, and the comparison result will be true. Otherwise, the result will be false. Okay, run the program. X being equal to y is true. They share the same value. But x is y is false. X is not y. They are not identical. X and y are identical only if they have the same object ID. Or more accurately, if they are pointing to the same object. Remember, an object ID is indeed the memory address where the object is kept. 100 is an integer object. And 100.0 is a floating point object. They are different objects located at different memory address. So they will never be identical. We can print out their IDs to have a look. Their IDs are different. An integer can be converted into a floating point number with the float function. Here is an example. I convert the integer 100 into a float object. X is assigned an integer value of 100. Pass it to the float function. The function will return the corresponding floating point number. Assign the return value from the float function to variable y. And then print out variable y. Okay, run the program. Variable y is pointing to a floating point number object. Its value is 100.0. Similarly, a floating point number can be converted into an integer by using the int function. Here, instead of 100, assign 100.0 to variable x. And then pass x to the int function. Now variable y is equal to the value returned from the int function. Also print the data type of y. Okay, let's run the program to see the result. The floating point number, 100.0, has been converted into the integer 100. Then, what if the value of x contains a fractional part? Like this? Run the program again to see the result. The result is again the integer 100. The fractional part of the floating point number was removed to form the integer. Besides the float and the int functions, Python has other built-in functions working with numbers. For example, these are 5 common built-in functions dealing with numbers. The divmod function computes the quotient and remainder for a division. The round function rounds up a number to the nearest decimal places. The sum function calculates the sum of a series of numbers. The POW function raises a number by a power or an exponent. The ABS function provides the absolute value of a number. I will go through with you some of these functions. Along with this, I will explain to you the use of a function in more detail in case you are new to computer programming. First, the divmod function. This function takes 2 arguments. Arguments are the values that we pass to the function for processing. In return, most function will return a value. We can receive the return value with a variable. To use the divmod function, pass 2 arguments to it. One is the dividend. One is the divisor. Both are numbers. The function will then return to you a tuple object containing the quotient and the remainder. Okay, I believe now you understand the basic operation of a function. Let's demonstrate the use of the divmod function. In this statement we pass 2 arguments, 7 and 2, to the divmod function. Assign the return value to variable x. Then print out x. Run the program. Got the expected result. It is a tuple containing the quotient and the remainder. The next built-in arithmetic function I am going to demonstrate is the sum function. It takes one necessary argument, which is a list of numbers, and an optional number argument. Let's ignore the optional argument and just pass the list argument to the function. We're going to execute this function call in the program. Okay, run the program again. The result is as expected. Besides those built-in functions, some add-on modules also provide many other useful functions dealing with numbers. For example, the math module. The sqrt square root function is one of the functions provided in the math module. Let's use it to compute the square root value of 81. To use resources from the math module, we must import the module to the program. So in the program, type in import math. Then the program can access the square root function defined in the math module in this way. The square root of 81 computed successfully. Besides the square root function, there are many mathematical functions defined in the math module. You can go to this link to visit Python official documentation website to find out more. For now you may not know what a module is. No worries. In the future videos I will explain module in more detail. Now we have talked about using built-in functions as well as imported functions from add-on modules to do computation on numbers. Besides, we can also use certain mathematical operators to do number calculation. Here are the mathematical operators used in Python. Among them we are familiar with these 4. Plus, minus, multiply and divide. So let's talk more about these 3. This double forward slash is the so-called floor division operator. This percent sign is the modulus operator. They together perform the same thing as the function divmod does. The floor operator returns the quotient of a division. The modulus operator returns the remainder instead. Okay, let's calculate the quotient and remainder of dividing 7 by 2 using these 2 mathematical operators. Let's directly compute and print the quotient by using the floor division operator and the remainder by the modulus operator. Okay, let's run the program to see the result. Yes. Result is as expected. This double star represents the power or exponent operator. It performs the task same as the POW built-in function does. For example, this statement raises 2 to the power of 5. The result will be 32. Correct. That's all for this video. In this video we went through some useful functions, as well as some common operators of integer and the floating point number. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.